In Iraq, the United States conducted a series of airstrikes in the northern part of the country on Saturday, striking targets near Mosul Dam. Airstrikes also hit fighters from the Islamic State group near the Sinjar Mountains, where there are reports of another massacre of ethnic Yazidis. Iraqi officials say the Islamic State killed around 80 Yazidis on Friday, though the claims cannot be verified. The Islamic State's insurgency in Iraq has displaced more than 1 million Iraqis and killed at least 500 Yazidis.
Protests are continuing in Ferguson, Missouri, where hundreds of enraged residents took to the streets again early on Saturday. The protesters are angered by the police shooting of a black teenager, Michael Brown, last week. Police reportedly attempted to disperse at least one group of protesters overnight, but demonstrations were mostly peaceful on Saturday. In recent days, Ferguson police have been accused of using excessive force to disperse protesters.
Two convoys of protesters have arrived in Pakistan's capital Islamabad, demanding Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif resign over allegations of electoral fraud. The protests are being led by cricket star turned opposition politician Imran Khan and radical cleric Tahirul Qadri. The two men say they hope to bring 1 million Pakistanis to the streets, though numbers so far are in the thousands. Sharif's government has accused Khan and Qadri of trying to undermine Pakistan's democracy.
West Africa's Ebola epidemic could continue spreading out of control for another 6 months, according to Joanne Liu, the head of aid group Doctors Without Borders. Liu warned containment efforts aren't keeping up with the spread of the disease and described affected areas as being like war zones. Over 1,000 people have been killed in the Ebola outbreak, which has affected Liberia, Sierra Leone, Guinea, and Nigeria.
Texas Governor Rick Perry has been indicted for abuse of power by a grand jury. The Republican governor and 2016 presidential hopeful is facing 2 felony charges, including abuse of official capacity and coercion of a public servant. The maximum penalty for the first charge is 99 years imprisonment. The allegations stem from a probe launched last year into Perry's threat to veto millions of dollars of state funding for a public corruption unit unless its head stepped down.
At a press conference in Bogotá on August 15th, the names of the first 12 victims set to appear at peace talks between the government and the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia were announced. In total, 60 victims will travel to Havana after being selected by a panel made up of representatives of the United Nations, Bogotá's National University and the Catholic Church. At the press conference, panel members stressed their search for balance within the group of victims.
There are victims of violations not only at the hands of the FARC, but also victims of the state and the paramilitaries. And to me it seems extremely important to recognize them, as well as to recognize the victims of the guerrillas.
According to the director of NGO Red de Paz, Luis Emil Sanabria, despite calls among local media for a greater number of FARC victims to be sent, the proportion within this first group is more than adequate and demonstrates a genuine effort to address the scale of the guerrilla group's crimes.
We know that in Colombia, the majority of victims are from the actions of the paramilitaries, followed by guerrilla organizations and the state. In that sense, to us it seems that within this delegation, 5 people represents the scale of victims of the FARC.
With the first group of victims now in Havana, both sides at the negotiations will soon come face to face with some of the darkest events in their history. Experts agree that while the task of representing 6 million victims is almost impossible with a group of just 60 people, the balance struck within the delegation that's being sent to Havana offers the best opportunity for meaningful agreements to be made. This is Charles Parkinson for Telesur English in Bogotá, Colombia.
In Bolivia's upcoming elections on October 12th, 7 special seats in the Congressional House of Deputies will be reserved for indigenous candidates. The country's Supreme Electoral Tribunal established the designation in accordance with last year's law on the distribution of seats in the Bolivian Congress.
We are about to hold the 5th round of discussions among different indigenous leaders and candidates for the 7 special seats in order for these candidates to be visible in the proposals that exist for indigenous peoples. which is a central point of the Bolivian process.
Indigenous Campesino Union leader Rodolfo Machaca says that indigenous people in Bolivia play a fundamental role in state decision-making processes, which is reflected in their special congressional seat designation in this year's upcoming elections.
En Bolivia, único también en el mundo, ¿no?
Bolivia is one of the few places in the world where indigenous people are taken into account and are given responsibility and influence in the political sphere of administering the state. And so what this means is in our country we are experiencing a high-intensity democracy.
Bolivian elections are just over 8 weeks away when the country will participate in what the government has coined intercultural democracy. Reporting from La Paz, Bolivia, this is David Doherty with Telesur.
Facts that have marked the course of history. Productions designed in the English language and made for the English-speaking world. This is Documentary. Watch it on telesur.net/English. Telesur, wherever the news, you'll be there.